Yeah, it says that we're live on Facebook. So a moment of silence, and Lou,
Right.
you have a moment to become a monster.
Welcome to week Happy campers. Welcome to week 2 of Mezcal Winter Camp. This is the heart of the Agave edition. I am Lou Bank,
I am Chava Perivan.
and we're going to talk to you tonight about different agave. So week one was an exploration of different Oaxacan Espadines. Oaxacan Espadin being what, like 90% of the market?
I haven't seen the numbers, but yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
Something like
Let's
that. It's
say
like
90%,
90%.
or at least it feels like 90,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is even more important.
Yeah. So this week, what we're going to do is take what we're going to do, what you've already done. We've taken, we've not we, our beautiful partners at Mission Cantina in Seattle. I'm doing this off of my memory. And with
Yeah.
the heart medications, my memory's not that good. Mission Cantina in Seattle, and Copal in Santa Cruz, and Calavera in Oakland, California.
Wow, I'm very impressed, Lou.
Thank you. So what they do is they offered these sets. They offered you guys these sets of tasting samples, 5 bottles. Each of the bottles produced the exact same way by the same family, just each one different agaves. So last week, right, the question was, okay, you've got these espadines that have been processed by different mezcaleros in different parts of Oaxaca, and how are they different?
Yes, because one will say, I guess in other contexts, like this is rum from Haiti. All the rum from Haiti should taste the same way, right? We are sort of predisposed to think that if a lot of things come from the same place, they should share a lot of things between them.
Yeah, flavor profiles, aromas, right? Yeah,
Mhm.
and I thought it's interesting. So I thought we had gotten across the point last week, or I thought I had. Um, but this is one of my problems, Chava. You know this.
What is one of your biggest problems, Lou?
One of my
Go.
biggest problems, I feel like if I say something briefly and quickly, that it sinks in and everybody gets it. And I don't think we actually, like, we had somebody send a comment to one of our partners after last week's session saying they still don't understand what we were talking about.
No, 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 no. And you're saying it like I think we didn't frame it probably in the most understandable way. And this is something people have called us on before, that we are like
Yeah, it's
the
hard. It's hard to get out of our own heads. So,
yes.
right. So the question in essence is, well, wait a minute. If these are all Espadine, and in fact, I think 3 of them were produced the exact same way, using the same
Mhm.
methods, right? Just in different regions. So why did they taste different? And like the leading answer is that there should be some answer, and I don't think there is. Is the point? I don't like there's not one thing that you could point to saying, well, this is why this one tastes like it comes from Matatlan, and this one tastes like it comes from San Luis
Wait,
de.
wait, wait. Let me rephrase what you're saying. I think
Okay,
in many other categories of alcohol or even food, you can reference them to certain things. So you can say that a certain wine tastes the way it does because it comes from a certain altitude or from a certain type of soil or for a certain type of fermentation, right? And I think,
I don't I'm not going to just buy into that and say yes. Like
well,
if
and,
if you're
and
telling me this is
wait,
true,
I'll tell you why a lot of the times it's more true than it isn't. It is
mhm,
more true than it isn't because we're talking about highly industrialized systems. So their
fair,
correlations are very well calibrated. They've
right,
been able to do something and then get an end product out of it, correlate them, and create a marketing out of it. So think
right,
about the whole industry of the Japanese whiskey. It's all about their water. And they say that their water gives special flavor profile. They don't even malt their barley. They cannot grow barley in Japan. Their whole
really.
marketing, yeah, no, they import everything
Mm.
pre-malted. So all their marketing comes from our water is very special.
It's like the
They,
bagels in New York.
I have no idea
Just
what
trust me
this.
on that one.
Okay, I'll trust you. No. Point being, we wish we had that answer, or maybe not, because that will mean we'll be working with
Well,
highly industrialized context. But
right, we actually we do have the answer. The answer is that, like, if what we instead of having three espadines from different parts of Oaxaca that were produced the same way, if we had three espadines from Oaxaca from the exact same palenque that were produced in the exact same way by the exact same guy, but at three different times, there would likely be a significant difference in the flavors from one batch to the next.
and most importantly, we wouldn't have the tools to know exactly why is that the case. What
Right.
was the most important factor that created those differences? Was
Because
it the
it's
agave? Was it the fermentation? Was it the time of
well,
the year when it was made? Uh,
well, and again, as you pointed out, like when you're using these pre-industrial methods, it's really hard to exactly replicate. How fine are you going to mill that agave, right? It's not going to be exactly as easy for the yeast to reach those sugars every single time because it's going to be a different gradient of milling.
yeah, I think the closest comparison I can think of, it's are you into classical music, Lou? Do you happen to like classical music?
I like it because I don't have to pay attention to it.
Okay, you like it for the wrong reason. But
Exactly.
well, I guess the closest comparison that I can have is, you know how people that are really into it, they prefer different versions of the same piece of Chopin played by
Mm,
different by different players. And what is the most important factor there? The microphones that were used to record that, the player himself, the piano, the room. It gets really complicated, and there's a bunch of blogs and forums and books that try to discuss which is the best version of Chopin and which is the closest to the original intention of Chopin.
God, that is
So
that is a beautiful analogy. That is an out of the park analogy. God bless you, Chava.
I drank coffee in the morning.
Okay,
Anyway,
so that's part A of answering the one of the questions that wasn't asked. And please, if you have questions, don't be shy about asking questions. Like questions,
it
I
helps us
still
so
have
much.
questions about this stuff.
Yeah,
I still have questions, and I'll continue to have questions about this stuff. And there's nobody. If anybody tells you they have all the answers, that they're they don't.
nope.
They
I know,
don't.
and if they act very aggressive trying to convey the truth, do not
Mhm.
like that. That's red flag right there.
Yeah, even the mezcaleros, like while we have the
Especially the
greatest.
mezcaleros.
Well, like there are experts in what each of them do individually. Like, right? Like
Mhm.
Lalo knows what Lalo knows because nobody knows what Lalo knows better than Lalo. But you just move him over one community and they're going to be doing things in such a different way because again, pre-industrial methods that even he's not an expert at that.
And not only pre-industrial, Lou, it's also methods that are not recorded. That you cannot, Lalo hasn't made, or any of these producers have a manual that they give to their employees and then tell them, this is my SIO Lalo from La Locura Chichicapan style. Follow
Right.
this till the end of times. It's all in their heads, and their heads are always changing.
Right.
So the way they're working today is probably very different to the way they were working 5 years ago, and that they will be working 5 years in the future.
Yeah. And now, so the other thing that came up was somebody wanted us to talk about what people should be tasting, like what flavor notes they should be looking for in the different mezcals that were
Oh,
sold last week.
actually, I was talking with this about this today with our sound engineer that helps us in the Agave Road Trip
Roy,
podcast. Yeah, and we were. He has a Jewish girlfriend, so he spent a lot of time in Israel, and he was discussing flavors in Israel and flavors in Mexico, and he was talking about how certain species and certain vegetables tasted so different in Israel than how they taste in Mexico.
yeah.
He says, how do you call this in English? You know, the thing that little herb that they put on pozole?
Oh,
Thyme. No, that's
thyme.
not.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's thyme.
Oregano, oregano.
Oregano.
Yeah.
Is that thyme in English?
No,
No?
two different herbs.
But how do you say oregano?
Yeah,
Oregano?
we say oregano. Yeah.
Okay, with that accent. Well, he was saying that he was saying that in Europe or in Israel, every time he got oregano, it was like a shy little tiny oregano that was trying to say something, but it was really really shy and small. And when you throw here a little bit of oregano to your pozole, it's an explosion. You
It's
can't
funny.
believe what's happening to you.
You know,
Uh,
in fact, when you go to the spice stores here, I shouldn't say in all of the U.S., but certainly in Chicago, there's oregano and there's Mexican oregano.
it was like the Mexican Coca-Cola, if you want. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, there you go. Perfect.
but anyway, but then we were saying, imagine if we're having this discussion about a thing that it doesn't need a lot of processes, and we're just talking about our same mouths traveling to different places and
Right.
having complete different experiences with this one ingredient that it's actually rather simple. Radish, for example, the radishes in America doesn't taste like anything. Here, the radishes are spicy and great and
Well,
wonderful.
we also have really good heirloom radishes here, to be fair. You just don't see
Okay.
them in the most of the grocery
Well,
stores.
I guess my point with all of this is my mouth. Everybody's mouth is a mutant,
Yeah.
and what can taste for me as this experience of the atomic oregano might not correspond to the experience you've had with oregano. Therefore, we usually try to make the tasting notes one of the most participative areas of our tastings. We are not here to tell you what you should be tasting. We actually
I,
find it tremendously interesting to know what do you find. Well, like your especially unique calibrated mouth,
yeah.
what is it in your life experience that it's attaching to certain flavors. And that every time I ask someone to tell me how something tastes, I learn so much about them and the place where they come from.
That's beautiful. You know, and for me, honestly, it's I've found when I've gone to other people's tastings that when they say, "Oh,
Wait,
this
wait, wait,
tastes of
wait, wait, wait.
juniper and bubble gum."
But before anything, everybody open your bottles, serve them, and start
Jesus, yes,
sipping.
thank you.
Yeah.
Open them, pour them. It doesn't matter what order. You know, I mean, I could make us start with the Espadin.
Yeah,
Uh,
so Espadin. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
start Espadin. Yeah, I guess you should go in a
We got
specific order.
carried away. We're
We
terribly
did.
sorry. Yeah.
God, man. Thank you for that, Chava. Um, but I hate suggesting what I'm tasting to someone because then that's all that they oftentimes all they can taste and all they can smell is what they've been told to smell. And I hate the idea that there's one right answer. And I find it so intimidating about wine that there are these people who get these certifications and they're special people who come and they tell you this is this and that's that. And hey, I'm not done yet. And and if, oh, well, you're going to taste black pepper and you're going to taste grapefruit. And if I don't, I feel inadequate. And I don't want anybody walking away from one of our classes feeling like there's something they don't get.
I still have a ton of respect for very elaborate palettes. I find a ton of respect for palettes that have been educated to identify certain flavors according to an industry standard. Because that's you train your palate to test certain things that have been established by industry, and that's very useful for production. So I have a great appreciation for that. I just don't think that if you're not going to make a living telling the industry how to push certain flavors, you should be all crazy about it. I think
Okay.
we're here more for the pleasure of it, no?
Okay. Works for me. So now, what are we doing this week? We're talking about the heart of the agave. So again, you've got five. I think actually, if you're in Santa Cruz, you only have four. But you've got, in theory, five different mezcals, certified mezcals that were all made by Margarita Blas and Carlos Mendez Blas, her son, a mother-son duo, all made by them in Santiago Matatlan, Oaxaca,
World capital of mezcal.
world capital of mezcal. And they were all made by cooking the agave underground in an earthen oven. Barry, I
Mhm.
think I think he does it for 5 days. It might have been 6 days.
I went through their webpage. I think it's five.
It's funny. I actually made their webpage, and I still can't remember. I might have made up the five when I put together the webpage. You know, in fact, if you go to the YouTube page for Sacred Agave, the Sacred Agave YouTube page, um, uh, I interviewed Carlos. He gave us a tour of his palenque in Santiago Matatlan, and you can watch that if you really dig these and you want to know more about Carlos, you can get it from, I'd say, the horse's mouth, but it's not his horse, it's his mouth, and then he's got two horses that you get to see in the video. So Carlos and Margarita made these, cooked in the stone lined earthen oven. They milled it using a tahona. What's a tahona, Chava?
It's a big rock. How many tons do you think it is? Pounds
Oh,
wise, it's gonna
oh, at least
be,
one.
yeah, well, it's at least 1 2 tons. It's a
1 to 2 tons.
big stone that it's pulled in circles by he uses a
He uses
horse
horses.
size.
He's got two horses.
He's got
Yeah,
two horses, so the
yeah.
horses
One is
uh
named Titan. No, it's Tyson. Tyson and Palomo.
Palomo. Okay, awesome.
Yeah,
So the motors or the force comes from the horses. They're making this wheel go around and around and around, and they're milling the agave with that stone,
right.
which is great because imagine if you had a big blender. Everybody likes to make salsas, right? Is that or guacamole? No.
Sure,
I
just sure, close enough. Yeah, they'll understand.
Okay, so I think everybody agrees that there's a huge difference between throwing your ingredients into a blender or milling them by hand. And a lot of the importance of this, every mezcalero will swear that the milling it's the equivalent of trying to avoid the blender. They're blending with the taona, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Sure.
I'm looking very happy. I know.
No, it's okay. Um, uh, Sorry, Tina asked a question. I'm going to get to your question after we go through the process, Tina, because I
No,
think, yeah.
but I agree with China. Anyways,
No, no, no,
China,
but
I'm with you.
not yet. 'Cause we're
Okay,
going to get
yeah, yeah,
diverted.
yeah.
Okay, and then they ferment in open air wooden barrels known as tinas.
That's correct.
Yes, open air wooden barrels. So it's just the natural yeast coming down, eating the sugar, spitting out CO2 and alcohol. And then they distill in wood-fired copper pot stills.
Yes,
Twice.
and his stills are very pretty. I really like Carlos Mendez setup because I think it's one of the cleanest palenques I've ever gone to. Everything is very well put together. So I think his expressions are significantly clean. Clean in terms they don't have any of the mistakes that sometimes you find with other guys. Like their fermentation.
Who
You're gonna
who
give
are
me.
you being mean to? I don't like who.
I'm not gonna give. I just I've never had a mezcal by Carlos that has problems with fermentation, so that
No.
has over the top
Okay.
lactic notes, or
Okay.
that is not rounded and pretty. That has like I've never had something coming out of him that has a very aggressive alcoholic note. Everything it's
Okay.
very you can taste his operations through his spirits, and they're
Okay.
very tight and well put together.
Okay. That's nice. That's nice. And so everything here is the same except different agave. So you're drinking. Oh boy. Let's see if I can do this. So you've got Espadin, Madrecuishe, Cirial,
Yes,
Tepextate,
tepestate.
No.
Tepestate. Yeah, everybody says tepestate in Matatlan.
Oh, in Matatlan, that's true. Okay, and Tobala, Tobala. Except if you're in Santa Cruz, you didn't get the
Wow, what a
Tobala.
treat.
Sorry, they were out. They're out. So the point then is, what is the difference from one to the next? Like, what makes these bottles different? And it's just the agave. And I believe they're all 47% ABV, with the exception of the Espadin, which is 45%. So, Java, what's the difference?
Oof. I think I'd like to start with something you always say. I think a lot
Sorry,
of people.
Noel wants me to point out that, hey, it was only 4 bottles in Santa Cruz, but they also paid less in Santa Cruz. Okay, okay, clear, fair. That's fair.
Awesome. Well, I think a lot of people approach us usually like new friends that I found. Like some, did I tell you this? Some elementary school kids that I hadn't seen in 15 years. They just texted me a few days ago, and they found me through LinkedIn. And before even tell me hello, how are you doing? How has life been going? The first thing they ask me is like, which mezcal should we get? We see in your LinkedIn that you know something about this, and they didn't even ask about a brand. they ask me which agaves do you recommend. So, which is a very Mexican thing because we're over brands, I guess, here
Oh, I
now.
don't. Oh, yeah. Okay, that's fair. I was gonna say it's not just a Mexican thing, but yeah, I get
Well,
that.
just the
Yeah,
kids that I get to know. But
yeah,
the thing is, a lot of people ask us which is our favorite agave,
right.
and the usual answer is, well, it depends who makes it, right? We cannot swear just by an agave, but they are very distinct from one to the other. It's not like grapes that even if they're very different species, they sort of behave very similarly. They
How do you
have
mean?
they have similar growing patterns, for instance, or apples for cider. Most apples have very similar growing cycles, and
Oh,
they and
cycles.
yeah, cycles. They get harvested at the same after the same amount of time.
Oh, that's a
The,
really interesting point. I've never thought about that
uh,
because
the,
the
the,
agaves,
they okay, so that's one.
it's all over the
The
map as to when you, right? So you harvest, you're going to harvest the agave. This is, and I think this also speaks to the differences, right? You harvest the agave when it reaches maturity. But what does that mean, reaches maturity?
It has the most amount of sugars inside itself that you can get. It's the fattest that
It's
is going
ready,
to be its life.
it's ready to reproduce.
Yes, but
It's
it's
ready to reproduce,
mm,
right?
to throw its stalk through the air.
It's going to, right, right. Did we talk about that last week?
Yeah, we did a lot, so we're not
Okay.
gonna go.
Okay. So
We spent like half an hour just
no.
discussing when to harvest. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hey,
I
and
got it.
everybody, if you're done tasting your Espadin now, I'd say just go with anything else.
Except
And
no,
just
no, Tepextate at the end. I want to say Tepextate at the end.
yeah, that's fair. Okay, okay. So yeah, just play in between those two and end on your Tepextate.
Yeah, yeah,
Tepextate. Sorry.
Tepextate. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So yeah. So differences in how long it takes to reach maturity, but also at time of year that it reaches maturity. The sense that I get, and stop me if I'm wrong, is that uh, there's really no pattern. It's not like I see a lot more quiotes shooting up in February and March when I come down to Mexico, but I don't get the sense that it's always like in March. It's this agave reaches maturity in March, though. Well,
Well, no, 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 and I think something will probably say that you're right on that one. Way back in the day, they wouldn't make uni-species bottles of mezcal. That meaning all of the mezcal they will make were in blends of many different agaves,
right,
because you will have a big piece of land, you will have 15, 12 different species growing side by side, and when you had the time to start working with them, a lot of different species will get ripe at the same time, and we'll just harvest them all together and throw them into one big pit and make the expression of agave spirits that resulted out of it. But you
right,
did not by any means just went for the Espadin, or we just went for the Tobala, or what we have now. It's a very contemporary approach where the mezcaleros were, I wouldn't say forced, but they were invited by the market to to make
seduced by the
bottle,
market.
yes, to make bottles that were using just one type of agave. And this, to your point, it's almost an anti-natural way of working, because
Hmm.
yes, it's very hard to know when they're going to be ready, because consider they've been growing and collecting energy for 4 to 15 years in the case of the Tepextate. So just to give you guys an
Or 25 or 40 or
like a
50.
panorama, the Espadin you guys are drinking took anywhere between 6 to 8 years to grow, Lou, or
Something like that. I think Carlos speaks specifically to that in the video on the YouTube page. But yeah, something like that.
okay, the Tobala
Go
around 12 years,
12 to 15 years. Yep.
then the Cirial, which is a Karwinski,
Hmm.
probably around the same ballpark,
Yeah,
12
about
years
the same. Yep,
maybe.
yep, yep, yep.
Then this
Madrecuishe,
the
also
Madrecuishe, which
Karwinski.
is a Karwinski, so 12
Mhm,
years as well.
mhm.
And the Tepestate is the one none of us really knows, but maybe anywhere between 15 and 25.
Maybe. I don't know. It's one of those things that they tell me the number and I've just come to not really believe it.
Okay, so another big difference to the other things in the world, and why they're so different. With grapes, every 4 or 6 months, there's not a discussion.
Right.
How long do
Right.
they take to be ready? Here, one of the biggest areas of controversy, which
Well,
sounds
for
almost
us, not for
ridiculous.
them. They don't like. I don't get the sense that they really care.
Yeah, but still, like in the marketplace, and even for scientists, nobody can accurately say this is how long this and that's a big problem for the market. Not to
Well,
be able to say how long is it gonna take for something to grow if you're making an investment in a piece of land, and that's crazy.
well, no, yeah, but it's going to change so much from depending on where the land is and what the
Exactly.
land is made of.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to say it's that's why these agaves are so different to each other, because I think we were interviewing this guy has a PhD, Ivan Saldaña, on agave metabolism, and what he was referring to, well, the way he was describing agaves was that they're tremendously plastic plants, that they are the masters of adapting to different
Hmm,
places,
right.
and that and maybe this is going to be controversial in the context of this tasting, but he will argue that sometimes the space is even more influential in the flavor profile. The space where this agave is grown could be even or as influential as the species itself.
Hmm, right.
Now, Lou, do we know where all these agaves came from? The lands where they were harvested?
We don't. I would assume based on what I know of Carlos and Carlos or Ismael, if you happen to be on, just holler at us. But I believe they're all going to be reasonably close to Matatlan. I think he just buys from farmers around the region there. But to that point, I'd be surprised if he bought the Tepextate from a farmer, right?
You think he found it?
Well, I think somebody else found it for him. I don't think he's going out in the
Oh.
fields, right? But I think it's safe to say that there aren't a lot of people farming. Somebody's got to be farming Tepestate somewhere, but there aren't a lot of people farming it. Whereas the Espadin, 100% is going to be farmed, right? So there's
Mm,
also going to be variations based on that,
yes.
right? When
And
something is raised in a difficult environment, it tends to produce more robust flavors.
and that again is our perception. There is not a absolute convention on that. But some of the better, more robust, more pretty agave spirits that we have had, arguably come from agaves that have suffered quite a bit.
Right, which is not to
Um,
say that the farm stuff is bad. It's just you're gonna get a I think a more complex, a different thing going on.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it will. So I guess this also creates a difference, right? You will say that the Espadin, the Madrecuishe, the Cirial, and the Tobala are most likely farmed agaves, whereas the Tepestate that they are drinking right now most likely is a wild agave.
Right.
Will that be
Well,
accurate?
I think so. I think so. Does it say? I don't think he says on here.
No. I don't
Yeah.
believe
Yeah.
they will. But that's our speculations around this, and I think this is giving a lot of tools to maybe find some of those differences on the different expressions they have at hand. No.
Yeah. But I think another thing that's interesting is to look for the commonalities here. Right?
Okay.
Like this is a conversation you and I have had off camera before, which is, these mezcals that you're drinking are 45% alcohol and 47% alcohol, which means they're also 55% water or
Mm.
53% water. And we don't talk about it a lot, but when the thing is primarily water, the water is going to influence so much the flavor.
Mm-hmm. But there's a trap there, and there's a trap that I don't love when talking about the influence of water in the agave spirit.
Hmm.
And usually, when I listen the people talking about this, always the conclusion is I can taste some salts. There's some minerality in there.
Hmm.
It's like if the
I
water
say
was
that.
yeah, I know, and I hate it. Well, I would like to think of the water just as a medium that allows for things to happen or not. And I haven't really found any article or piece of work that tells me what would be a preferred water for
Well,
agave spirits? What is the medium where the flavors can flourish the better?
well, it would be the one that's most neutral.
And I don't know.
Well, yeah, no, it would because otherwise, like, hey, when I say minerality, I'm not just pulling that out of my butt, right? Though I do pull a lot of things out of my butt. So if you go, and I've done this, if you go
Mm,
to Ixcatlan, Santa Maria Ixcatlan, where our friend Amando makes beautiful agave spirits using papillomae, he's fermenting in the bull skins, right? You go to that community, he'll always take you on a tour. He'll always take you down to the water source where the water's
mhm.
coming out. He uses spring water, and if you taste that spring water, it's an epiphany. Suddenly, you like, oh, have you never done this?
No, I haven't. No, no, no. Okay,
Oh my
then
God.
maybe I shouldn't be talking about this with such confidence. Okay, okay. No, keep
Yeah,
on,
no,
keep on, keep on.
so the beauty is, right, if you go there and you taste the water, suddenly you start recognizing that flavor. And it's not, I'm not saying that every agave spirit that comes out of Santeria Ixcatlan tastes exactly like this. But what I am saying is, if you've had a glass of that water, and it's safe to drink this water, I've done this. I brought this water to Scotland, in fact, so we could do a tasting with the Scotch Malt Whiskey Society, and they could do because this is what they do with Scotch, right? Is you want to add a couple of drops of water to your Scotch, and ideally it's going to be the water from the same community where the spirit was made. Like that's what they do. So I brought this with. That was the
Mhm.
whole reason I collected it, and they were blown away by it. But I was blown away as well because suddenly I could taste the similarities between Amando's agave spirit, his father's agave spirit, and then
Mm.
all of his cousins who I've tasted spirits from. The water is so significantly important in terms of flavor profile.
Okay, and where does forgot his name from Carlos Waters comes from?
Right, so I believe that
Carlos's
Carlos, yeah, I believe Carlos is getting his water from a well, the local well.
from Matatlan.
Yeah, from Matatlan. Yeah,
Okay, okay.
yeah,
So that's one thing that all of these spirits have in common, the
right,
water. The
right.
other thing they have in common is the
And
process. They're all copper distilled.
mhm.
What else the all of these agaves do you think may have in common
Well,
that you
okay, so
could?
so let's go to Tina's question finally. See, I didn't
Okay,
forget you,
yeah.
Tina.
Now it makes a ton. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Go
Right?
ahead.
How was that transition? Do I get a point for
Wow.
that?
Yeah, yeah. You get a
Yeah.
sticker on your forehead.
Bam. Okay, so Tina asked, or Tina said, our experience, I guess she's speaking for, maybe it's Sean speaking for Tina, but our experience has been that women typically taste more variables than men do. Has your experience been similar? Now, I'm not even sure how to answer that question because it feels to me like I would have to have literally made like a Venn diagram to see did men have more flavors or did women? I've not paid attention to that. I hear that a lot, and I've been told that a lot, but I'm not sure that I buy into it. Which is like I'm not sure that I
Hmm.
buy into it. But
Uh, yeah, I mean, my because I grew up. I mean, I'm in Mexico. I have a Mexican family, and if you ask my father to chase something, this is just my personal experience, right? And my mother chased something. Definitely, the more sophisticated palate, I will give it to my mother. There's no question about that. But in the mezcal making context, I also wouldn't be absolutely sure. I've had extremely good experiences with both genders. Let's say it like that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Same here. Same here. But but to that point, and I get that this was a statement you made that was a generality, and generalities are always going to be false in some circumstances, right? But my head goes to the process that and this gets back to our question, like the things that are the same, things that are different. But the thing that blows me away so frequently is the palate memory of the men and women who make these spirits,
Mm.
right? And I am saying men, like I have no doubt that when I go down to Mexico with my beautiful wife Connie and she's tasting these spirits, that she is not tasting nearly as much as when we're at a mezcalero, a man's palenque, she's not tasting nearly as much as that man is. Because that man has to like taste all of those complexities from the first stage, well, I guess not the first stage, not the raw agave, but tasting that just out of the oven agave, and then
Mm.
tasting it after it's been sitting and dry fermenting, getting some of those bacteria on it, and then tasting it again when it's been milled, and then again when the water's added, and then it's as fermenting, and remembering all of those stages and adjusting them the next time if something didn't come out right at the end after weeks, in essence, of processing, right?
Yeah, they got the chance to deconstruct this every time they produce. So
Yeah,
they a lot of things that might have a very low volume in the final product, they get to experience them with very high volumes. I guess it's a little bit when you're doing mastering in music. If you recorded every instrument separately, then you listen to it and you live the full experience. You
right.
know exactly what all of those instruments are doing. Whereas if you just listen to the mix already done, you might, without knowing everything that is behind, you might lose a lot of that. No.
Right. So that speaks to the commonality again between these expressions is they were made by the same mother son team,
So that's
and
a dream team. That's a dream team.
that's a dream team.
Yeah, you got the mother sensitivity. Like you have both genders working together with their
Oh,
palates
oh,
and
oh,
their.
oh, oh.
Yeah, you
Yes.
know, you know what? I love that conclusion a lot better. It's not that you've got men versus women. What about you got both different approaches making something beautiful, which is the case with these spirits.
Oh, that's a lovely sentiment, Chava. Well done again. And it's not even just that you've got the two. Thank you, Tina and or Sean. Amen. It's not even just that, though that's significant, right? Both genders, but also two generations.
Yes, which
Two
I think.
generations. And so let me like I like to speak to that for a minute because Margarita is interesting. Margarita learned how to make mezcal from her mother, who also made mezcal, right? So it's she's a second generation mezcalera, and I believe like I don't know how many generations it goes back in her family. I'm pretty sure that her mother learned from her father, um, but then she ended up marrying a mezcalero who has sadly since passed. So that Carlos was raised by a mezcalero and a mezcalera. And he started learning when he was 10 years old. So you've got between just the two of them so many decades of knowledge and of developing those five senses to taste all these things and smell all these things and determine what's good according to their palate and what's not good.
And something that I would like to add on top of that, something really cool about Carlos is that he has traveled quite a bit. He has had the chance to travel all around the world. I mean, I look into his Instagram and he has pictures in Italy, in I don't know, like he's got all the postcard pictures you can imagine. So he has been able to. He has a big privilege not a lot of the mezcaleros have, which is to understand his product or his spirit within a bigger world.
Hmm.
If that makes sense, and I think that does inform a lot of what we're drinking right now. Actually, I mean, people saw that I was serving myself from a water bottle, but that's how I keep. I just got a sample from Carlos, from his Espadin, and it's so different to all of the other Espadins that I have. Actually, there's. Don't you agree? You know, the first time I tried Carlos stuff, I was very confused because I've tried a lot of stuff from Matatlan,
Hmm.
and I was sort of bored from the Matatlan flavor profile. They are. I mean, of course, it changes a lot from producer to producer, but there was like a common ground that I didn't quite. It just didn't speak to me with a lot of strength.
Hmm.
And and there's a few that I love, but not with the passion that I like some of the other weird stuff that we find when we go really deep into the mountains.
Sure.
Uh, but Carlos, I was so surprised. I could. I mean, this can sound terrible, but I will even say that I sort of underestimated the potential of his spirit just because of the context where he was located. And well, it's
Which you should, I think it's an important point, right? Like because Matatlan is the world capital of mezcal, it's sometimes treated as the pampered baby, and therefore it's not as celebrated, which is a mistake.
Yes, and when you're an angry teenager, as I was a few years ago, and, well, at least I was acting like that in the mezcal world, where it's like everything that is commercial is bad, blah blah blah. Big corporations destroy everything.
Right.
Matatlan is a sellout because they are the guys that produce the most. You get blinded. You get
Mm-hmm.
blinded not because of what you're trying, but because of the context.
Right.
And when I tried Carlos Spirit, I swear to God, I have not tried an Espadin that tastes so much as agave. I think it's the Espadin that I've tried that really makes a clear impression of the cooked agave.
Nice.
I like it. It's just insane for me. It's almost like a candy. So it's
Nice.
maybe it has to do with this collaboration between him and his mother about the fact he has traveled so much. I have no idea, but it's really remarkable for me.
Nice. I was in Dallas at the beginning of last year, back when we were able to travel, and visiting some friends at Los Almas Rotas. And I sat down and they asked me what I wanted to drink, and I said, just Shad, just send me whatever you want. And it was mind-blowingly delicious. And I was like, what is this? And it was an Espadin from Gracias a Dios, which is literally Carlos's neighbor in Matatlan.
I used to work by at Gracias a Dios piece of land that Sombra used to rent.
Yeah,
So yeah, I
yeah.
know Oscar very well. He's good.
Yeah, it was mind-blowing to me to have this thing that I had never paid attention to because I thought, oh, it's just another Matatlan Espadin. But to your point, there can be these absolute beauties. It doesn't matter. There can be absolute beauties and absolute duds wherever you go.
Yeah.
And 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 this is, while the purpose of this tasting is certainly for everybody to taste the different agaves and start, thinking about the different flavors that come from the different agaves. Man, I've tasted some awful tepestates.
Uh,
And
I I've been very lucky. I've been extremely lucky.
you've never had any. All I could think was that agave died in vain. And that I think is the danger in falling in love with the specific agave as opposed to the specific producer.
Okay, but now I want to make like a drastic jump, I guess, and I would like to explain a little bit of each agave because I think we spent a lot of time talking about the Espadin. The
Yeah.
Espadin is the warhorse. The Espadin it's the tequilana bever of the mezcal world. It's the one that gives you more yield per kilogram of agave. It has the somehow it evolved to be very efficient at producing sugars and keeping them. So it doesn't only produce a lot of the sugars, but when you harvest it, they're still there. He didn't consume it. And in a way, I'd like to think of Espadin as the pale ale of the agave world. It's I always say it's the shyest of them all agaves.
Hmm.
So it the hand of the maker is where it shines or it destroys the most the agave. It's an
Okay.
no, like I think that it's not a crazy statement. Then going to the Karwinskis, which is the Cirial and the Madrecuishe, they are weird looking kids. I call them the punk kids in the agave world because they are like small tree. They will make amazing Christmas trees out of Karwinskis, no?
Sure. Tall, thin.
It's all
Yeah.
thin, spiky, all over the place, but it doesn't look at all like the agave we have behind us. Do you have? Well, we're not going to be able to just Google a Karwinski, and it's a stalk, and it's just it looks more like a Joshua tree, no?
Yeah, I can see that. Sure. Yeah, we'll go with
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. Like it looks more a Joshua tree than the agave we have behind us. And again, this talks about the great diversity that it's within the agave world. That it doesn't matter that they're both agaves; they can be morphologically very distinct. And I think that if you're gonna find similarity, like very strong similarities between two of the drinks that you have right now, it will definitely be between these two Karwinskis, which I found that at least to my palate, most of the Karwinskis, I find it the easiest to recognize when I'm doing blind tastings. Then you go to the Tobala, and the Tobala, I don't know if it's the same in the States, but in Mexico, it's the luxury agave. It's the fancy one.
Well, I think honestly it's the fancy one because of the states. I think we
Hmm.
made it fancy.
Oh, really? You're taking credit now. I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
this is
totally.
cultural appropriation. I learned about this in school.
So, my theory is the reason that anybody cares about Tobala is because the first time we had decent mezcal outside of Mexico, the first time anybody in the USA really recognized good mezcal was when Ron Cooper started exporting under Del Maguey. And his original line, I might have this a little bit wrong, but I'm pretty sure his original line was three Espadins, one Pachuga made with Espadin, and a Tobala.
Okay, for people that don't know, Del Maguey, it's the oldest, most established mezcal brand. I think they control 35% of the market or something like that.
No,
It's some
nothing like
crazy
that.
stuff.
No, nothing like
No?
that. And they're not even close to the oldest. They're the
Well,
oldest of the artisanal fancy,
well,
not
the
not
the oldest commercial, like, no? Okay.
no, man. We get Monte
Monte
Alban,
Alban.
like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
right,
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah. What am I
Gusano
saying?
Rojo, like you
Yeah,
get
what
all
am
these
I
other ones.
saying?
It was the first one to really be commercial up here that didn't have yellow food coloring and a Gusano and the little worm in it.
So boring. Anyways, so okay, maybe that's true. Maybe the first agave that you guys in America were able to taste that had a little bit more nice information was the Tobala, and that's
Yeah, there
why
was
it
more
became.
traditional that actually harkened back to what people drink in the communities where the spirits are made. And so he had this line, and it eventually expanded, but he just continued to add different espadines from different places for years. So you had these 45 to $65 bottles that were espadine. Then there was the Pachuga. I think I'm doing this in the right order. I think the Pachuga was 125, and then the Tobala was 175, or it might have been that the Pachuga was 125. I'm sorry, the Tobala was 125, the Pachuga was 175. But
I
either
mean,
way, it basically, by his pricing it the way he did, he said Tobala is special.
yeah, but remember when we were Felix, which is one of our favorite producers. Last time we visited him, he told us when he does a big party, he only serves Tobala because for him it's like drinking honey. That he can feel the honey going down on his butt. Well, he made a lot of descriptions that I don't know if I feel comfortable referring to. But what he said is his favorite agave from them all. And
Hmm.
a characteristic of the Tobala, and correct me if I'm mistaken, something that Tobala really likes to do is to grow on slopes.
Hmm.
It loves its slopes. So it's one agave that really likes not to consume a lot of water. And usually it's easier. It's really hard to harvest it because it's in the slope of a mountain, but you can harvest it almost all year long because even if it's rain season, the slope has dried, like it's not absorbing a lot of water, and it's mostly very concentrated sugars and not a lot of water.
And it's a really tiny agave.
It is a tiny one. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
it's
like
and it's
size
very
of
pretty.
yeah.
The leaves are so beautiful. They look like ears, like dog ears. I think some people say.
Nice.
I mean,
Okay.
so that's the Tobala,
Mhm.
and again, 12 years approximately. And I think that will be extremely distinct to the Karwinskis and the Espadin. And the Tepestate. Okay, you get the chance to talk about the Tepestate, your favorite one.
Well, yeah. So the Tepextate, the thing that I like talking about the Tepextate, well, one of the things is the pronunciation, right? Like I really dig talking about the pronunciation because I won a bet once. So yeah. So in some communities it's Tepestate, in some communities it's Tepestate, in some communities it's Tepextate. It's so
Mm-hmm.
confusing. Things just get so confusing. But um, I've heard people say that it takes up to 45 years to reach maturity. And I don't know how they know that. There's no way anybody said, "Oh yeah, when I was a little boy, I was playing soccer with my brother in this field and we saw this little Tobala seedling and now here it is. It's reached maturity." I'm kind of calling bullshit on that. And then, I've been in Miahuatlan talking to the Ramoses, and they tell me that their Espadin takes 10 years to reach maturity, and their Tepestate, or Tepextate actually in their community, takes 12 years. So So that to me is one of the interesting things about it. The other thing is, I think in terms of agaves that I see that in the wild most frequently, it's that one.
Okay,
It's the
okay. Yeah, sorry. I got too excited about something that I was going to say.
no, it's okay.
Are you done?
Yeah, sure, I'm done.
A massive difference between all of these agaves, their efficiencies. So for
When you
Espadin,
yeah,
so
fair.
I think this is really important, and I think a lot of the value that it's attached to some of these expressions, it's in regards to the efficiency of the agave. So these are going to be very general numbers, but an espadin will give you 10 for every 10 kilos. Oh, that's very pretty. That's a tepestate. Yes, they're the
Yeah.
most beautiful things. You know, in Mexico City, they planted a lot of tepestates by the cycling ways or
Yeah,
routes
by the bike paths. Yeah,
by the bike paths. Yeah,
yeah,
and I just love looking at them. And yeah, they're very pretty.
yeah.
Um, so Espadin, 10 kilos, 1 liter at 52 ABV.
Give or take.
Uh, give or take 10 to 25, honestly. But we're just gonna give one number just to give to give a comparison.
Comparison, yeah.
In Karwinski's, actually, that's where I have a lot of trouble. I've heard 20 is the average. 20 kilos for
Yeah,
1 liter,
sure.
somewhere around that.
Yeah.
Tobala 25, 20, 25, more to 25.
Hmm.
I have distilled Tobala, and it was, I believe, we were closer to a 25 mark. Tepestate. Tepestate, it's the worst story that we've heard is 1,300 kilos for 3 liters of Tepestate.
But that's ridiculous. That's off the charts ridiculous, and it's not common.
No, but when I distilled Tepestate, I believe it was 8 tons, and we were able to retrieve somewhere around 150 liters.
So how many kilos is that? Can you do the
Yeah,
math
no, no, I
quickly?
cannot do it out of my.
Oh, okay, fine.
Well, it's very inefficient, and for me, at least for me, the flavors that come out of the Tepestate are alien. They're marvelous. They are so confusing because they're so full of stuff.
Yeah, so even though we started off this episode talking about how I don't like to talk about flavors, when I was down there a few years ago, I was meeting a friend who was hanging out with Lalo and Minas, and I asked him, "Hey, I'm going to pick you up at like 2 o'clock. Could you just get me, if you happen to see some, could you get me some of the little unopened what would you call it? Not a blossom. It's a blossom when it does open. The flower,
Uh,
the
you know the
unblossomed flower.
flower, maguey flowers.
Yeah, maguey flowers from the quiote of a tepestate. What I like to do is I'll put them into a little flask and then pour in some agave spirit and bring it back with me because you can't bring plants back. But I like to be able to talk about the different agaves and show the blossoms, or at the time I did. Um, so I asked, could you just get me like, like a dozen of them? And I showed up at 2 o'clock, and he and Lalo were still out in the fields. They were gone for 2 hours, and I was getting so angry. I was so angry having to wait, right? When my time is limited in Mexico, you make me wait 2 hours for you. And then they finally showed up, and the reason they were gone so long was they were harvesting an entire quiote for me, which, like, I think of all of those dead baby tepestates, like, not in my name. I
Oh,
didn't want that.
come
They
on, Lynn.
but so that but I like they gave me the whole quiote. It was just this giant head of, I don't know, 2,500
Oof.
flower flower blossoms,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
some of which had opened, some of which had not. But the smell of the pollen was overwhelming, and as a consequence of that one experience, um, it's it's usually when somebody gives me a tepestate, I know it because I can pick up that pollen sensation that I had
Oh,
from that
wow.
moment. Almost, not all the time, but almost always when you give me a tepestate, I will recognize it because of that pollen incident.
That's so beautiful. And again, talking about all these different access to flavors that the mezcaleros have that you just
Hmm.
don't have when you are not in the context.
Right, and because they gave me 2,500 and I only needed a dozen.
Oh, I
Um,
love it.
I brought a bunch of them back to the Posada, the little bed and breakfast where I stay. And Thelma, the woman who cooks breakfast,
Mm.
every day she made me a different meal with them.
Mm. They're super appreciated in Oaxaca. If you go to a Central de Abastos supermarket, they always, well, not always, but if you're lucky, you're gonna find these ladies that sell bags of agave flowers. They're lovely with eggs. They're lovely
You
with
know,
well,
taco with chorizo.
yeah,
Yeah,
with beans. I find that the beans overpower them, but this just the texture of them is wonderful.
yeah.
Yeah, but actually, to that point, when we were, and this is going to be, I guess, the last story of the magueys, and I think we should also try to get people in if they want to talk a little bit about the experiences and the flavors they're finding.
Yeah,
But
sure.
when we distilled the Tepextate at Sombra, uh, all of us, the smell was so crazy and so overwhelming, but so delicious that when we finished the production, many of us put of our own money to buy that production.
Wow, okay.
So most of the production was bought by the employees because we were smelling that for, I think it took like a month or something, the production, and we just couldn't get it over it. It was just so delicious and great. And it was an experiment, so we're like, can we buy the experiment, please? Because it was wonderful.
Nice. Okay, so if you do want to come in and talk about what you're tasting and what you're smelling, and there's no obligation, if you want to, just raise your hand and we're going to bring you in and you can talk.
Yep.
Because we
And if
feel badly that we didn't let you do that last week. I didn't know
and
everybody wanted to do that. I guess
and
this is the thing because I'm not a wine guy, right? I don't know these things. I don't go to the wine tastings where they do that.
I believe that I actually was thinking about that. You know, you call these tastings, and I
Hmm.
think the way we approach this, it's not necessarily the way tastings go, because you know, what are you going to tell about the context of Jack Daniels? You know, like, yeah, you can tell about the history, the old history, but then you're going to say like they took this barley, or they took, I don't know what they use in Jack Daniels. It's a Yeah,
Corn,
I'm not very
I'm
familiar with
sure,
Jack.
and wheat, corn and wheat,
Corn and wheat. They
corn and
took
wheat.
that. They bought it from some like seriously big producer. They put it through a process system, and here you go. So you have to spend a lot of time in the aromas and the taste to have something to talk about. Otherwise, what the hell are you going to say?
Yeah, I don't know Jack.
Uh,
Okay, nobody's raising their hand, so I guess we don't have to do the tasting part. I guess in the
Lovely.
end I win. I win. So, okay, so let me tell you a little bit about this is just an anecdote now. This has nothing to do with what you're tasting, but I think it's a fun anecdote. So, this brand that you're tasting, Cruz De Fuego, is owned first the name, right? Cross of Fire.
Yes, that's a good one.
It's a badass name. So, the owner of the brand is my friend Ismael Gomez, and
Coolest kid in the block. I love Ismael.
really good guy. I met Ismail. I was in this bar in Chicago on a Tuesday at 4 o'clock, and I was just
Typical,
I was there with
typical.
my friend Bart Darfler. That's his real name, and he wanted to know about mezcal. And we were in the hotel for this other business thing we were doing. Oh boy.
What?
Noel wants to know about the Cirial. Okay, I'll make the story fast. So, you be prepared to talk about Cirial. I'm gonna finish the story. So I brought him down to the bar and started explaining to him the 13 mezcals they had. That you could see like two of them, and then it was just from the necks of the bottles. I was explaining what they were, and it was Tuesday. It was 4 o'clock. There was nobody else in there except two other people at the other end of the bar. And as I'm like 20 minutes into my sermon with Bart, the two guys come over and they say, "Excuse me, who are you?" Like, I'm Lou. So it was Ismael and his business partner who had come in to talk to the bartender and impress them, as he said, impress them with our mezcal knowledge because nobody knows anything about mezcal. And then there's this gringo talking to this even bigger gringo about mezcal, and we ended up talking. I swear to God, like this was in February, talking for like 2 hours about agave spirits, rural Mexico, and really hitting it off to the point that they kicked us out because we started sharing spirits with each other. And And by July of that same year, we were down in Oaxaca together visiting producers. And he's
Awesome.
been one of my closest friends ever since. I love Ismael, and I love Carlos and Margarita. I just love this brand.
Yeah, no, they're all really great people. And I think Ismael, I mean, he speaks perfect Spanish. His family is Mexican, and
He's from
he's an
Guadalajara.
yeah, yeah, and I
Yeah.
think that gives him a big advantage in understanding a lot of this. I think
Yeah.
a lot of times I see gringo guys that have amazing palettes, have amazing intentions, but just the language barrier, it's too big to get informed if you cannot, you know, speak the language. And I think Ismail has that big advantage in his favor. And he's just a really cool kid, and he's so
Yeah.
approachable and nice, and he has a good eye. So I'm a fan of Ismail, to
Yeah.
be absolutely honest.
Okay,
So
now
Cirial.
Noel. Hmm?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Cirial. Noel is asking out Cirial.
Yeah, so like literally the only thing I can tell you about Cirial, and I'm guessing it goes by a different name somewhere else, but the only thing I can tell you about Cirial is A, it's Carlos's favorite agave.
Mm.
B, as you point out, it's a Karwinski. C, I had never heard of it until I tasted it from Carlos.
Really, I've had some cereal before from Quiche, from
Yeah,
the brand that is called Quiche. Not the
little.
and car whiskeys are, in my experience, one of the most confusing ones. Talking about regional names, so maybe you've we never explain things properly, Lou. So we've been referring to agaves with two names. Uh,
Oh,
what
it's a
do you
good
think?
point.
Yeah, wait. Anyway,
There's the
sorry.
scientific name and
And
there's
then
the familiar name.
yeah, so for example, my name is Salvador, which is the name that I have in my birth certificate,
Your
but
scientific name,
my scientific name, and then everybody calls me Chava.
your
And depending
familiar
where I
name.
go, they call me different nicknames. So think of agave in the same way. There's the name that corresponds to its species, which in the case of cereal is Karwinski, agave Karwinski. That is the same species as the Madrecuishe, but then in different places, they call them with different names.
Well, but
Now,
it's not even just that.
it's not even just that. It's it's
Right,
getting
because you
confusing.
like you can have well, you're drinking a Madrecuishe and a Cirial, both of which are Karwinskis from the same place. So it's not even just same agave, different familiar name. You've got the species, but then there are variations within that species. So when we say there are 200 to 300 kinds of agave, it's not 200 to 300 species of agave.
It's subspecies and
Yeah.
and even I mean I love to tell this. I love research and I love going to. I think the only reason why it was worth to pay a tuition in a university in Mexico is because I got access to JSTOR and EBSCO and all these beautiful databases of knowledge. And I love that's what I do for fun sometimes. I just go in there and I
This is why
found
I'm your only friend.
yeah, that's why Lou is my only friend. But I found full articles that are $120 to access, and they're 35 pages discussing why agave Karwinski subspecies blah 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 should be considered different to agave Karwinski species blah 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 because they found that the leaves has a different morphology and the thorns are
Oh
slightly
my
different
God.
and the way and their growing habits are also slightly different. And this is something
Did you see that that article cost $125?
to access sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, you couldn't pay me $125 to read that article. That sounds like the snoozer of all articles.
Well,
But
what
and I'm sorry, go ahead.
yeah, but it's very difficult. And actually, I wouldn't, and I would love to ask this to Carlos. And I think that'll be something great if we can email everybody in this session later on to just. I would love to know Carlos' explanation of what does he see different in a Madrecuishe than a cereal.
Oh.
How does he know that one is one and the other one is the other?
Oh,
Because
literally you're talking about appearance.
yeah, well, or how does he go to the fields
Hmm.
and says, okay, guys, just harvest cereales, and which are the telltales of those plants are different to the madrequish? Because for the very untrained eye, I wouldn't like I
Sure.
wouldn't bet on calling one and the other.
Yeah,
Is it how they look? Is it how long do they take to grow? Is the
right.
kind of like is the kind of insects that come across? Is the smell of their pollen? Like what the hell does differentiate one to the other?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Good point. But I like Noel. It seems to me like you're asking the question because you get a little like when you said exactly. It strikes me that you're probably as frustrated as I am by all of these different names of agave. I honestly, here's the point where I threw my hands up was you go almost anywhere in Oaxaca. Okay, let's very specifically. If I'm down in Miahuatlan, if I am down in Ajutla, if I then cross Santa Catarina Minas and I go to Chichicapam, right? So now there's four communities that I've just like there's a path and I've jumped over one of them, Minas, and I tell them I want a quiche, right? I'm going to get a Karwinski. That's the scientific name, the Karwinski. The quiche, the familiar name, is the same in those three communities. But if I ask for that quiche and I'm in Santa Catarina Minas, which is nestled between these communities. If I do that there, they're going to give me an agave rodacanta, which everywhere else would be called Mexicano,
And
but not in Santa Catarina Minas. That was it for me. I threw my hands up and okay, I no longer care what the agave is called. I don't. I'm going to trust the mezcalero. I'm going to taste everything they've got, and if I love those flavors, I'm just going to keep buying things from that mezcalero. Whether it says Espadin or Tepextate, whether it's Espadin means the same thing or Tepextate means the same thing, I don't care. As long as that man or woman can produce the aromas and the flavors that speak to my palate, I don't care if they make it from tomatoes. I'm drinking it.
okay, can I suggest some crazy experiment?
Hmm.
And I've been kicked out of a party for doing this. So just bear with me. And if you don't approve, tell people and don't do this. But I think because we are in the comparison mood, what about how do you feel about cold ensembles, Lou?
Cold ensemble. Oh, cold ensemble. So by a cold ensemble, you mean somebody has distilled an Espadin, and then they distilled a Tobala, and then they distilled an Araqueño, and then after they distilled all three, they blended them together to meet a specific flavor profile, as
We,
opposed to the way where you would just cook them all together, mill them all together, ferment them all together, so that when you're distilling, they're already blended.
yeah, but in the case of everybody in this tasting, they have things that are very close together. So I think that trying a cold ensemble at home might not be heresy for this specific tasting.
Oh,
Say
I
take a
yeah.
little bit of the espadin and take a little bit of the tobala, throw both in the glass, mix it a little bit, and see what happens.
In fact, they do sell, Cruz De Fuego does offer an ensemble of the Espadin and the Tobala. So you could even do that and then taste how it tastes when they do the process all together, which will give you another way to look at this. But I don't have a moral opinion on this at all. I don't have a moral opinion. In fact, one of the guys that we know very much, they're purchasing their Espadin from one community, and then they're purchasing their Tobala from another community, and they bring it to a third community where they pour it into a still together, blend it in the still, and then do a third distillation after adding fruit to it.
Yep. Yeah. So there's a lot of games there. Actually, I used to disapprove for that, but lately I've been trying to be more playful. I like Noel's Antoli
Of course you
last
do,
message.
because you summed it up well. I never sum up anything well.
Yeah, but I think this is something we should try in the future. As you say, it's very producer specific and it's very um, community specific. So I think it will be great for the producers to give us their explanation of why one agave, in their own words, why is this agave different to this other? Because I think when we see them, we see other stuff, and maybe the differences for them are relevant in another way. And I think,
Mm.
I think it's a question that's not asked a lot to them, because everybody thinks you should just respect what they're saying and not ask. It's almost like putting in the line their authority. And I think there's nice ways to ask this. And
So you'll ask the questions, not me. Got
yeah,
it.
absolutely.
Okay.
What else, Lou?
Mm.
what other tricks do you have under your sleeve?
I, I,
So, would you suggest the cold ensemble experiment? I think it's I sometimes do that, and I think it's interesting. If it doesn't I wouldn't do it with a Tepextate whatsoever, actually, because I think that Tepextate will overpower anything you try it with. But I think it will be interesting between the Karwinskis and maybe the Tobala. I think the Espadin can be almost like a chaser. You know how
hmm,
some people drink a beer and a mezcal. I usually drink
sure.
an Espadin and another mezcal. Uh,
I'll have a shot and a shot. Thank you. Well, yeah, there's that, but I'll tell you the other thing I like to do when I'm doing these side by side tastings is as you've been drinking, because of course everybody did the method where they're taking tiny little sips, right, and experiencing them, and the smaller the sip, the bigger the taste, and the more frequently you sip, the more of those complexities that your palate experiences. Um, so I think it's really interesting at the end to go back to where you started
mm,
because the espadin should taste very different to you. You should be picking up, you should be. And if you're not, you're a bad person and you're not allowed to drink mezcal anymore. You should be picking up different things in the flavor now that you've had all this other stuff to drink.
yeah, I think it has a lot to do with you're making your mouth travel very far away. So it does take a while for it to understand what's happening to it, and this lot of things that you're not very familiar with. And once it has more references, and I think that's a really cool thing about doing tastings, that you're hitting different spots, and probably an area that was not very sensitive in the beginning now is super sensitive and it's paying a lot of attention. So it's great to go back and just remind that area of your mouth, like, hey, remember that thing that you tried a few minutes ago that you really didn't care about? Now you might care about it.
Nice. Okay. Well, I think that's it for tonight, Chava, unless there are questions.
Yep.
And seeing
Um,
none, so next week campers. Next week, what we're going to be doing is a tasting of basics around Mexico, so that you're going to get to taste like a little tequila, because the basic in Jalisco, the basic agave you're used to seeing is going to be a Blue Weber. We're going to go back and do a different Espadin yet again. Every week, a little Oaxacan Espadin. Going to do another Espadin from our friends at Sombra.
oh
And
yeah.
then we're going to do a Cupriata out of Michoacan, and then
Mm.
a Cupriata out of Guerrero.
Guerrero,
Guerrero.
Guerrero.
Guerrero, and then a
Guerrero.
Cenizo, which is our poster child agave, a Cenizo out of Durango.
Yeah, one of my
Um,
favorites last lately. I'm in love with Semiso. I was
yeah,
gonna wear my well, I won't get bother with that.
that's I wore that yesterday. I know exactly what you're
Oh,
talking about.
they made this
Espiritus de
beautiful.
Durango.
Yeah, they made a beautiful T-shirt, but the one that has the steel. You don't have that one with the Durango steel.
How'd you get it? We'll talk about this off air. Martha's going to be in trouble. That's who's going to be in trouble. Martha.
Maybe, maybe.
Okay, happy campers. Thank you so much for joining us for the second week of Mezcal Winter Camp. And we look forward to seeing you in another 7 days. Drink respons. Thank you very much, Tina, for the very kind words. Thank you very much, and we'll catch you later.
Adios. Bye.